a stranger with a gun came upon 2 teens taking pictures under a rising full moon. But violence is only the beginning of this story.
Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and I've spent my career talking about how lives are undone by violence. The Letter is a podcast about how lives are remade. Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
In today's episode of Project Recovery,
she went into the kitchen to go check the medication. She thought maybe I just took all of it or something. And when she came back into the bedroom, that I actually had a loaded gun to my head in our closet.
Make sure you listen to the end. Find us on Facebook at Project Recovery. We'll have that and much more coming up. Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. More importantly, it's about recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's my good friend, Dr. Matt Woolley. He's a clinical psychologist, and it's brought to you by our friends at knowyourscript.org. Now, the cool thing about knowyourscript.org, Dr. Matt, is they believe in this podcast. And without them,
they've been great.
We wouldn't be able to do this. Now, one thing that I would like to kind of bring attention to is that when we talk about Know Your Script, a lot of it is dedicated to the opioid epidemic that we're in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But that's not only prescriptions they're talking about, because whether you know it or not, there's a lot of other prescriptions that aren't in the opioid classification that people are abusing. And so they want you to know that, whether it's your Adderall, your Ritalin,
stimulants, any sort of painkiller, anti-anxiety medications.
Xanax is a big thing.
The benzodiazepine class is very addictive. And so what's great is they're trying to help bring awareness to all of those things. And then some medications, just in large quantities, are dangerous, and we don't want children to be around those sorts of things.
Now, Dr. Matt, I want to pick your head and have you listen to me just for a second.
Let's pick my brain. I think my head is...
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, okay.
But, we've been saying now for the past 6-7 months that the new epidemic's going to be a mental health epidemic.
Yeah, it's it's here, I think, but yeah.
But, and we've been talking about how it's a perfect storm for overdoses, suicide, domestic violence, all these things.
We've had such a concentrated year of stress. 2020 was such a concentrated year of so many different kinds of stress that it's getting to people. Yeah.
Then explain to me why I see this. It's out today. It says preliminary data from the new study by the Utah Department of Health has found COVID-19 has not caused a significant increase in suicide, drug overdoses, or mental health issues.
I haven't read that, so I don't know.
The study released Thursday believed Utah's existing mental health and substance abuse resources may be the reason why.
So I do know that we have dropped out of the top 10 for suicides in the state of Utah out of all the states. And that's the reason. You just read it. It's because the state of Utah, compared to other similar sized states, we put in so much value on healthcare and specifically mental health care. And so lots of different organizations have partnered with the state of Utah, and suicides are down, in my opinion, because of that.
And in the recovery world, a lot of times we argue what came first, the chicken or the egg. And what I mean that is it the addiction? Is it the mental health that caused the addiction, or was it the addiction that caused the mental health? Now, I know there's been no clear science to which came first, but the reality is it's a perfect storm. And there's so many different things that are happening, so many contributing events and traumas happening that...
Well, you know what they call that?
What?
It's a bimodal causation.
Okay,
and what that means is it's both. It isn't one or the. It's not which came first. It's they both can in either direction come to the result of addiction. So mental health problems are miserable, and if left untreated, a person is likely to seek relief, and that relief may become an addiction. People with addictions who maybe came to it accidentally because of family history and prescription, like we've heard 100 times on this show, they end up depressed, anxious, and with a lot of mental health issues as well. So it's bimodal, it's both directions, and so we need to treat it in both ways.
So I know a lot of people listen to this podcast either because they're in recovery, maybe active in addiction, or love somebody who's in recovery or in addiction. So what can we do to offer help? Because that's what we really want this podcast to be, is a resource for those who need help. And I think that's what gives us the drive to do this podcast, is because we know we are making a difference. How can we help people right now that might be going through some of those events?
Well, I think one of the main things that our show does, I think, is inspire. That's the feedback you and I get a lot from listeners of the show and guests of the show, is that it inspires people to take a second look at themselves or their family members and realize that they can be hopeful that recovery is possible. And then people have taken that motivation and gone out and found recovery. We also have tried to highlight some of the experiences that our guests have had. And so if you're listening and you really connect with a guest, listen to where they went for their recovery. Most of them say it, and that's as good as endorsement as any for somebody who's sitting here and saying, I went to this place and they treated me right, and now I'm clean and sober. So I think embedded in our shows is hopefulness and motivation, but also some pretty good, referrals to places where you can get clean and sober.
And another thing I would suggest you doing is go back and look at some of our back episodes. We've tackled issues like gambling, pornography, substance abuse, whether it's heroin, meth.
We've had extreme stories of substance abuse, and then we've had stories of the just alcohol creeping in and taking over a person's life. Yeah.
And so going back and checking some of those old episodes would really be beneficial. We also want to say that we are always looking for great stories and great ideas. If you feel like you have a story and you're willing and want to share it, we'd love to hear it. You can reach out to us on our Facebook or our Instagram. But we want to expand a little bit because, believe it or not, we are privy to some of the analytics, and that's the people who download and how often they listen and all that stuff. And some of the most sought episodes are the deal with pornography.
Yeah.
And it's been really hard to find somebody to come in. We're grateful for those who have, but it's hard to find people to come in willing to share their story on pornography. And you said it best. Chris Rock goes out and admits that he's addicted to pornography, and everybody goes, oh!
Everyone's silent.
And he goes, yeah, it's $1 billion industry, and I'm the only one with a problem.
Right. And it's because of the stigma. I mean, mental health has a stigma in general, of course, and addiction has a stigma in general. But pornography, come on, that stigma is huge. And the reason that people are downloading those episodes so much is because it's relevant. It touches everyone's lives. And it's interesting that we've sort of overlooked, we have an opioid epidemic, but what about a pornography epidemic? When you and I were kids, if you wanted to look at a nudie mag, that was usually a little bit of an effort. You had to go find somebody's older brother, stuck it in the garage somewhere.
Or you found it in a field walking home from school.
Maybe, yeah.
I did.
I know. Yeah. But I mean, it wasn't easily accessible.
It wasn't in your hand 24/7.
Now it's sort of like the analogy I've given, I think, in the past is when you had your addiction, when you were drinking Bud Light, pornography is similar to if somebody had just backed the Bud Light truck up to your house and was constantly just bringing in ice cold buds all day long. Like that's
never-ending
supply. And you don't have to pay for it anymore. It's just free. It's right there on the phone, the iPad, the computer. And so many young children get hooked early in life, and it's a powerful thing. It affects your brain. It actually affects how your brain wires.
It works just like any drug.
Just like any drug. And so I think we'd love to have some people come on and talk about their experience with that. And we're working on trying to find some experts in the field to also come in and give us some treatment perspectives as well.
So we want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for allowing us to do what we do, because if it wasn't for those willing to come in and share their stories, we wouldn't have a podcast. It would be just me and you rambling, which is fun for about 10 minutes, but then it gets a little old.
Well, not you and I. We can do it for hours, but for listeners, sure.
Yeah, I got you. So, hey, thank you very much. We've got a great guest for you today. Please stick around. You're listening to Project Recovery right here on KSL.
A gun in the face.
Then all of a sudden they all kind of lined up. They pointed their guns at me. And this is the point where I thought, I'm going to die today.
Started 2 years of horror for an American in Venezuela.
They said, you need to give us your phone and get ready because you're coming with us.
I'm Becky Bruce, and I spent a year researching and piecing together Josh and Tammy Holt's story about their ordeal in a notorious prison.
That's when everything started to turn bad. We had another pound on the door. Boom, boom, boom. And there was the police once again.
You can binge all of the episodes of Hope in Darkness on kslpodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, welcome back to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, more importantly about recovery. And as me and Dr. Matt were saying a little bit earlier, it's more about the stories, because we found inside the stories, Dr. Matt, we can find hope, we can find inspiration. And there's sometimes, and I can just speak from my experience alone, but in addiction, hope is all you've got. And, and hope that it's going to be a better day. Hope that you can get out of this rut you're in. Hope that you can get back to somewhat of a normal life. And sometimes just a little spark of hope can bring miraculous things.
Yeah, hope actually in the field of psychology is a measurable psychological construct. You can measure hope, how much hope a person has, and it has direct effects on what people believe and what they do. And so people who are high in hope tend to be fairly high in optimism, and that combination gets you through a lot of life's trials.
There's something we say around my house all the time to my kids. We go, up with the hope, down with the dope.
Okay.
And then we also follow that
Is dope
up.
a big problem at your house?
No,
but
but it's just fun to say. And then then Bowden will come back and go, yeah, Dad, hugs, not drugs.
Nice.
We do a high five.
Yeah.
And then we go on with our day. He goes back to playing the Nintendo Switch, which he's been playing this game. Mike, you've got 3 kids. He's our guest today, Mike Muhlestein. How are you doing, buddy?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on today.
Good. Now, you've got 3 kids. Are any of them playing the Nintendo Switch?
You know, we actually just bought one of the old school original Nintendos where you everything's
awesome.
saved on there, so you can do the Zelda, Mario, all of them. So,
But there's a game out, Dr. Matt. I don't know if your kids are playing it, but it's called Animal Crossing.
Oh, my kids aren't, but I have quite a few patients
You know
of
what
that
Animal
age
Crossing
range.
is?
Yeah.
It's a job. It's a job for kids. You get on there and you do job stuff, and then they reward you, and then you come back the next day and do your job. It's not like there's no mission to the game.
Right.
It's a job.
No, I'll do you one better. We got an Oculus for Christmas.
Yes.
And they have Work Simulator where you can work like at a 7-Eleven or in an office. And I'm thinking, and kids love it.
My older brother, my younger
I can't get them to do the dishes.
Yeah, my
but
younger
they're doing
brother
Work
has an
Simulator.
Oculus. He also lives with my mother, so that probably explains why. But we went over there, we put that Oculus on, and if you don't know what that is, it's a kind of a 3D virtual headset, but you can walk the plank. Have you walked the plank?
No.
Oh, it's scary.
Oh, I haven't walked the plank. I fought Darth Vader. Now, that's my jam.
Okay.
Put me in a 7-Eleven, and no way. I went to school so I didn't have to work at 7-Eleven.
There you go. Hey, Mike, you reached out. You said you've got a story to tell. Let's find some back information on you, because you're a young man. How old are you?
So I'm 34 right now. So I'm average age-ish, right now.
But I love that average age. I didn't know. Yeah, it's average, sure.
But you grew up here in Utah?
I did. So I grew up in the Davis County area, in a pretty active LDS family, and I'm a middle child. So yeah, I had a really good upbringing, really good parents, and a good culture that I was raised in.
Went on an LDS mission?
I did. I lived in Jamaica for 2 years, which was Bahamas and Turks and Caicos and Cayman Island as well. So yeah, it was a great time. It was really where I evolved to learn the aspects of what service really can do in your life. I lived through a lot of hurricanes, and it was interesting, me growing up in a construction background and helping people rebuild homes, and kind of just diving in. I've always loved hard work. It was always fun to see what I could do to help other people.
And before you went on your LDS mission, your DOC, drug of choice, was alcohol.
Correct.
Did you ever experiment with alcohol?
So let me give you kind of a background. So, and I've dug really deep into this lately after I got out of rehab again in this October.
Now, you say again, just to let Dr. Matt in, because I know a little bit about your story. He got sober in 2018, but then he kind of went back out a couple of times, and now you've got 4 months of sobriety underneath you.
Correct. 107 days today. But just to kind of give you a rundown a little bit about me, I grew up, like I said, a middle child, very happy, go-lucky kid. On the outside, not a lot of people would see any problems. But on the inside, I definitely kind of held it in. I kind of felt like I was kind of the glue towards my friends or different people, my family, trying to keep people happy. It's always been like I've always been a pretty big motivator for me. It was easier to look at other people and try to help them versus really what's going on the inside of me. So I never really and I was okay with that. So all throughout junior high and high school, I was offered drugs and alcohol, and I refused because I really valued of what other people thought of me. I didn't want them to be like, oh, that's Mike. Oh, he drinks, or he, that was one of my prime motivations of not doing it.
It sounds like, Dr. Matt, that he really didn't want to let people down.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of describing kind of a natural self-consciousness. A lot of kids grow up and they don't know another way, but they feel sort of this, like all the eyes are on me or people are watching me. And that it can exist from kind of a small amount to a large amount to where we might pick up on anxiety. Sounds like maybe yours was moderate and you just didn't, you wanted that positive feedback because you were kind of self-conscious. You wanted other people to say, hey, Mike's a good guy. And so, yeah, that can moderate your behavior for sure and definitely influence the choices a kid makes.
Before we get any further into a story, and I don't know if we've talked about this before, Dr. Matt, but is the middle child syndrome a real thing, or is that just something we middle children say to excuse some of our behaviors?
You guys are perpetuating the stereotype. No, it's a thing for sure. Not every, you can't, there's no perfect formula, but, first children, middle children, last children, have different, they have different experiences in the family. Middle children often feel kind of, lost in the shuffle, especially if it's a big family. Mm-hmm. If you have, more than 3 kids, a middle child might feel kind of like, no one sees me, I'm not that important. Sometimes they will compensate with that by being kind of the funny kid or the outgoing one or the pleaser. But yeah, it's a thing, and some kids have it in spades, and other kids that they don't seem to be affected by it much.
The crazy thing, because in my recovery, I talk to my brothers quite often, and they're my best friends. But if you sat us all 3 down, Yancey, me, and then my younger brother Ryan, and asked us about our childhood, mm-hmm. we'd all have a different childhood experience. My older brother was like, hey, I watched you guys, I raised you guys. When parents got divorced, I was always tending you. I kind of just did whatever I wanted and was always kind of just myself and taken care of. And my younger brother was the baby, and he was lucky enough to get the benefits of all the hard work that gone into the years before that. You know what I mean? And so it's crazy because
you do have different experiences, and part of that has to do with your developmental age. Like all 3 of you never had the same parents, if you think about it, because their life experience and their age it was different for each of you at your developmental age. So when you were 12 versus when your older brother was 12, you had different parents in a sense, if that makes sense.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. And so that way you could all kind of reminisce about the Christmas when something happened.
When my mom forgot.
When your mom, that's a good story, actually. That's one of my favorites. Yeah. But
go back to sleep.
Like you
okay,
all, Mom. You all had a different experience with that Christmas, right? Like the event was the same, but you all had a different experience. Like the baby would be more insulated than the oldest and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, especially with big events like a family divorce or when mom forgets Christmas.
So, Mike, you're the middle child, and you feel like you don't want to let anybody down. So, in the early high school and middle school years, you just abstained.
Yeah, I saw, I had an aunt who was way into drugs and alcohol, and she disrupted their entire family. So I was like, oh, never do that. Kind of the DARE program. You hear all the horror stories, and I was just like, never going to do that. And it was about the time I graduated. I remember going on a trip to Mexico.
Senior trip deal?
Yeah. And it was like, let's let loosen the tie down a little bit. And I tried drinking a few times, and I noticed immediately of like how high my tolerance was, like instantly. And it was like kind of the idea of like, I like that, and like I want to do it again. It wasn't like, oh, I hated it, I threw up, and I'm not going to do it again. It was like, it wasn't like I was all geared and wanting to like waking up and doing it, but it was like, that was fun. So I did it a few more times, and then I turned 19, and I ended up turning my papers in and went on a mission. And I went to Jamaica out of all places, which, I mean, everyone hears the stories of marijuana and drinking. It's all over the place down there. I mean, for Christmas
That's why
time,
people go.
I mean, speaking about Christmas time, I mean, 8-year-olds get a Guinness for their Christmas present and they drink it,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. A lot of them do down there. I mean, it was like, I saw that happening. I was like, what in the world? You're drinking a beer? You're 8. You're 8,
We get baptized at 8. You guys
I know,
get a
right?
Guinness.
It was just different. But then down there, it was seeing it. It was kind of a perspective of what the destruction does to people as well. I saw that, and I was never like, I never did anything down in Jamaica. I actually did quite the opposite and was really high and mighty, you could call it. Just kind of really focused on the mission. And then I came home and I had a couple drinks with some friends here and there, nothing crazy, maybe a few times. And then I ended up getting married, and I had a really pretty big stint of not drinking. It just wasn't part of my lifestyle at that point.
Did you get married in the temple?
I did.
And so, I mean, you were checking all the boxes that you thought were the ones to be checking.
Right. It was kind of like you grew up in that mold of like, this is what you do. And not saying it was the wrong way or like I wasn't doing it inauthentically. I mean, no one's perfect. I've made mistakes, and, even prior getting married or whatever, no one's perfect out there.
I saw this thing, and that's where I get a lot of my research, but it was on Facebook. And listen to this. Jesus Christ was perfect, and many people hated him. So quit trying to be perfect. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Sure.
You know what I mean? We've got this. I mean, here's one guy that was perfect and still had people hating him.
Still can't please everybody, can you?
And so when I read that, I was like, yes. I mean, we try to go for this perfection, but perfection isn't possible. We try to do the best we can. And that's what it sounds like you were doing. You were doing what you knew and what you thought you were supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and same thing with our early years of marriage. I mean, we had my wife and I, we've known each other since we were 2 years old. So we knew our families, and I definitely blame a lot of myself of not being really great at communication. I would hold it in. It's kind of the middle child syndrome again. It was like just hold it in, and then eventually when things started to progress into my life, I would eventually have these blow-up moments where I would take it out on my wife and be like, oh my gosh, look at everything that you do. And it was just a way to deflect versus of actually handling the situation as it arises. Like if my wife was acting a certain way, I should have been like, I'm not okay with how you're acting, versus of just being like, what can I do for you? Let me protect this. And it was just the wrong pattern that I was doing. I had no idea that I was even doing it.
So how long into your marriage did you start to drink?
So let me talk about this. So my friends and kind of the groups of people that I surrounded myself around, even before my mission and even after my mission, they had different beliefs than me. They were social drinking or, smoking weed and I always kind of not put myself on a pedestal with them, but I was just like, they're just my really good friends. I choose not to do what they do. But the term that I've learned, I'm sure you've learned it in AA, is that you hang around a barbershop long enough, you're eventually going to get your hair cut. Mm-hmm. And that's, I take that very true to me. It was like I would start to be around my friends, and I would start to catch myself like having a beer, go on a guy's trip somewhere to like Moab and go biking and have a beer here. And it wasn't anything like over the top. And I was okay with that. My wife was okay with that I was like social drinking, but with my mindset, because anything I've ever done in my life, I've gone full force. That's like racing bikes. I went from 0 to 100 really quick. So
addict behavior.
Mind. Correct. So, and then you're using that part of your brain where you just jump into things and you really don't know what you're doing, and you don't know what the results or consequences are going to be. So I started to drink more. I started having more issues with my work lifestyle. I was in a family business, and not that it was a bad environment. It was just, I don't think I could say I was super happy doing it. And then with my relationship with my wife, we had a great relationship. It was my communication. I really feel like it was kind of the problem. So we had a lack of communication. We barely had our first child. We were learning how to do that. And that caught us both off guard of how to do it. There's not really a manual out there that they say, here you go to here's a baby. Yeah. So we were doing that, and I started catching myself in like the 2016, 2017 That's 2015, 2016, somewhere in that time frame where I started to catch myself coping and using alcohol as a crutch. And I can admit that for a while it was working. It worked until it didn't. And I just started noticing just my behavior changing and just the impulsivity of my nature of my friends that I was surrounding myself around, doing things I would never normally be seeing myself doing.
And what was your wife doing during these times? Did she notice you increasingly starting to drink more?
Yeah, she did. And we had conversations about it. Like, you know, she would say, like, I want you to keep it in the fridge so I could kind of like know what you're doing, you know? And I was okay with that. And but then again, the brain in the manipulative way, like you'll go buy another 12-pack just to hide in the other room. And then when it gets depleted, you go throw that in the fridge so nobody notices, you know? You have to think 2 steps ahead before people start catching on to you.
You become master manipulators.
For sure. And we'll
hurtful. Massage any situation to make it favorable for us. I mean, that's how I was. I mean, the thing you're doing with the fridge, I would do that. But except for I would put water back in the beer bottle and put it back in the fridge.
Right.
I mean, as sad and as horrible as that for me to say, I did that. You know what I mean? Because my wife did the same thing. She wanted to know how many I was drinking. I would drink more than I say I was, and then I would put water back in the bottle and put it in the fridge.
Right. I mean, if I got invited to a party or to go to a jazz game or something, I'd usually, you know, pregame like 10 times above what my other friends would be doing, and then I would have 1 beer at the jazz game just to show them that I was like normal. Because if I had that same pattern around them, they'd be like, hey, I think you got an issue. This is not normal. But what really started to, like I said, the nature of that group of people I started hanging around, we started doing things that we shouldn't have been doing, catching our places in places we shouldn't be doing. And that behavior became almost like a common thing. Like, this is what people do, you know, kind of the wine and dine. And when I was on business trips and a lot of horrible things happened that I have a, you know, massive regret for. And, you know, that I'm making my amends these days for those things that's happened. And but the really scary part that happened to me was, like, you know, Dr. Matt said that about the anxiety stuff, because when you didn't have the alcohol, the anxiety would really kick in. And I had a little bit of anxiety growing up, not so much I needed to be like medicated or go see a doctor, but I would catch myself like in Lake Powell, for example, and you're on a houseboat and you don't have any more alcohol on the houseboat because you can't take so much and hide it from the whole family. Otherwise, they'd be like, whoa, what are you doing? But you're in the middle of the lake and you're trying to figure out a way to get back to the marina to go get more, because I was up all night and just like my head was hurting and just you could feel these withdrawals. And that was really the first time I ever felt anything like that. And I thought I was going to die. And the only thing that got me through to even sleep through the night was knowing that my sister and my brother-in-law, who are both nurses, were sleeping on top of the houseboat. And that was the only comfort that I gave myself.
Is that if something bad happens to me, at least there's a nurse on board?
Somebody on board can actually like resuscitate me if I needed to. And
you thought it was that bad for you?
Yeah. Yeah, that was like 2017.
So those are detox withdrawals.
Correct.
You weren't just jonesing for a drink, but you were really, your body was going through
like I was shaking.
Detox. And that can be dangerous, right? I mean, that's why we always recommend people never detox alone.
Right. And I thought, okay, like worst case scenario, because my mind is always running. I was thinking, okay, a helicopter coming and picking me up. Like I was like, it gave me anything that I could find myself to convince myself that I'm going to be okay. There's something out there that's going to get me to a hospital.
So I want to explore that for a second, because, I mean, that's got to be just a frightening feeling. I mean, basically on an island in the middle of nowhere, and were you talking to your wife, or you're like, because I can't imagine anything lonelier, thinking you're going to die and not being able to share this with your wife because you're afraid what she's going to say. You're afraid that it's going to come out that you're an alcoholic and all that other stuff. So you just sit there and die a slow death the whole time, all night long.
It's the one word I can describe what I've been going through is it's painful. And it's just absolute painful. Every way that you look at it, the waste of time that I spent doing this, the waste of money, the waste of time I could have had in relationships, of really good conversations and depth stuff. It's just all of it is very painful. And
Did you think of yourself as an alcoholic, though? You're laying there. I mean, was that part of your self-vocabulary, or how did you – what was your perception of yourself?
You grow up as an alcoholic looking like, not to slam somebody, but like a homeless guy on the side of the road. And that's how I always envision, like, that is an alcoholic. And it's
I'm
really,
on a houseboat in Lake Powell.
Yeah.
Alcoholics aren't on houseboats
exactly.
in Lake Powell.
So, like, to me, I didn't really know how to, like, define it. You know, I was just like, I started noticing that I had a problem because I was relying on it to be able to get myself through the day.
But that's a great, Casey, that's a really great point that Mike's making, and that is that stereotype. People really need to get over that and ditch it, because we do have that stereotype growing up of the wino, you know, the person that just can't handle life is
the guy that's in the jail of the Andy Griffith. You know what I mean?
Right, the drunk tank,
time.
right? Yeah, and that we had those, you know, images growing up, you know, in TV and movies and whatnot, and we don't realize that there's anybody at any level of life, however you want to think of it, can have an addiction, and it looks like whatever the person looks like.
How many times did we hear people go, I can't believe that happened to Casey?
Right. Oh, yeah.
You know, he was on TV. He came from good parents. You know,
my mom has said that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and they go, well, that's not how addiction works. Addiction doesn't go, oh, this guy seems like he's got it together, or this guy comes, let's pass him. Oh, let's just get the downtrodden. Let's get the people who don't have a home. Let's give them that addiction. But everyone else, we're just going to give a pass on. But you're right, because you don't think that. No,
I never thought that. I mean, if people saw my upbringing and just how I lived through junior high school, you know, even on my mission, I mean, I was like the assistant to the president for 9 months. And then I still to this day have a really good relationship with him. He calls me weekly, especially through this trial that I'm having now. And it's like, no, people would never thought that. But again, people didn't really see it though, because I was such a good hider that nobody really knew like what was going down. And my wife it's kind of like the lobster in the boiling water. Like, she was around it little at the time, and she's faded into it that this became who I was. And she really didn't know how bad I was in it. And she didn't really know how much it was really hurting and affecting her to be able to be who she really is, you know? So it was just shocking when she would find more, and she would just, you know, we'd get in these arguments, and I would just sit there and justify it and be like, no, that was from like a while ago. Where'd you find that at? And then again, I mean, the addiction or alcoholism is so far beyond just the substance of the drink. It's the behavior of the lying, the deceit, manipulation, cheating, all of it. It's all part of it. And when you're that good at it, you become a master manipulator, and it's just a very unhealthy way to live.
So let's go back to the houseboat in Lake Powell. You don't die that night. So are you there for the remainder of the trip, or do you find a way to get alcohol?
So that was like midweek. So I was like counting on the days. I was like, okay, we're going to make it to a couple of days. And then my dad one day was like, you know, we need to go back to the marina. I got to go do some work, you know? So I was like, oh, I'll drive you there. And then like while he went into the marina shop, I like went and got a case of beer and started drinking on the boat and waited for him to come back. And I hid another case inside the boat so I could take it back to the houseboat. So I survived for the rest of the week. I mean, it's sick. If you really think about that mindset, just to get yourself to drive in a boat 2 hours to go get more of your medicine to survive. Like it's
sad. And I know it's sad because I've done those things. I've told it on the podcast before. My son was turning 2. I told my wife, I said, I got to go to Smith's. I got to get some stuff for the party. I came back with red Solo cups and 2 cases of beer. She goes, who's that for? I go, it's for the party. She goes, he's 2.
Right. Yeah.
You know, but I was seeing my son's
justifying it to yourself.
Yeah, it's a party, but
instead of saying
it wasn't
mine.
for him, it was for me. You know, and I've done those sad things. And looking back, I mean, just hearing your story, makes me think of so many things that I've done, and it makes me sad. And
it does, and I started noticing my anxiety starting to really pick up. Where, for example, I was a general contractor at the time. We were building projects in Nevada, and we were building the new airport in Moab, and I had these like tactics where I'd play with in my head of like I was hungover from the night before, so the morning of where I knew how to drive, I didn't drink anything because I was in a company car and I didn't want to obviously get a DUI. But I would say these things to my head inside myself, and I would say, okay, I'm driving from Salt Lake. I can make it to Spanish Fork. When I'm in Spanish Fork, there is a hospital there. You're safe. And then I would get from Spanish Fork and think, okay, I got to go up and over the pass, and I'd be to Price. I'm like, okay. Then I just like white knuckle it to Price, like 60 miles, thinking, okay, like I can make it there. I can make it there. And as soon as I got to Price, I had like comfort knowing that there was a hospital there. And then same thing again, pick it up from Price to Green River and so forth, all the way to Moab. It was like these moments where I got into a town, I felt okay.
And so the anxiety that you're having, so I get that the hospital represents safety, but is this because you're fearing the detox withdrawals?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
you
what
could
you're
feel
saying?
it,
Feel
and
it coming on?
Just the feeling of being hungover. It's terrible. I mean, I would never wish that upon my worst enemy, especially when somebody who's been daily drinking for a long time, to actually like come to. It takes a while. You know, it takes unfortunately a long time for your brain to kind of settle down a little bit. So that anxiety just picked up, and it was kind of worthless thoughts of myself, and I would be angry or really easily agitated, and the only way to curb it was like the hair of the dog. You just go grab another drink to get yourself to flatline so you're okay.
You know, when I was in my active addiction, you know, a lot of people were mad, and rightfully so, and I accept that. But a lot of times people go, this sucks because we're paying the consequences and we're not even partying. And I can tell you, I've said this on the podcast before, most addicts in their active addiction aren't having fun.
Right.
It's no longer fun. It's about survival. And Mike, you just said it right there. It's about you're drinking just to get even, just so you can make it through the day. You know, just so you can have these conversations, so you're not overridden with anxiety, so you're not planning your day around hospitals in case something bad happens to you.
Right. And then for me, I've always been grew up in a very hardworking mindset. You know, so I would get home and I would jump in, and I don't think I was doing this inauthentically of jumping to be a good husband and a good, you know, father to my children. I've always felt like I've had a great relationship with them and done everything. Was I always present mentally of being in this addiction? No, I can honestly say that. But I did everything in my power to overlap that, I guess, or like overshoot that, just so I could just focus on them and try to do what I could. And some people thought I was overdoing it, where I was like taking him to the rock climbing gym, or I was taking him skiing, and I was taking boating, and I was trying to do things to get out of my own mind and to all of the shame and the guilt and the worthlessness to go away. And hard work of working with my children or working with work, it just felt like it was an escape.
So you find a way to get a couple extra cases on the boat to get you through the last couple of days at Lake Powell. Where do you go from there?
So this is where things really took a spin. So at that point, I was catching myself daily drinking. Just the habits were really bad, and my wife started seeing more of it, you know, in the garbage cans, or she would see it hidden in areas in the house. And she started to confront me, and she was basically saying, I've had enough. Like, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to be monitoring you. You're lying to me about where things are hidden. And at that point, she saw another case of beer that was hiding in somewhere in the garage, and she left the house, and she's like, I need a break. I need a minute to think. And I wrote her this text message, and I just said, I need you to come home. I need to talk to you, and I need to really explain my situation. I'm so sick of living like this. I need some help. And it was my first time really reaching out to anybody to do that. And there was moments like on Instagram or like I would Google things and find people's stories of like how they were doing it, like how to stop drinking. And I remember watching this professional skateboarder of why he decided to stop drinking so he could focus on his career. And there's all these ideas, but I needed to tell my wife. So she came home, and I just broke down. I just said, I don't know how I'm like surviving day to day today. This doesn't make any sense. I'm not here. I feel sick. I'm throwing up every single morning. And what can I do? So we made a game plan to go see a doctor. So I went to our family doctor, and he asked me my habits of what I was doing. And he says, if you keep this up, by the time you're 40, your liver is gone. He's like, you got to learn how to slow down. And he did it in a calm, patient way where it didn't give me anxiety, but he was like, what's your habit? And I told him, and he would say, like, start to reduce it. And then he prescribed me some medication, and I've never been on medication before in my life. And it was like Lexapro and Librium and something else. And they were pretty high doses because of the amount of alcohol I was taking. And
those were to help with your anxiety.
And then also with the, trying to detox as well, to And so I caught myself, this is like right around the 4th of July of 2018, and I have always been a huge enthusiast of fireworks, always.
Sure.
You know, who's not? Yeah, I mean, it's my one jam of the holiday. And I drove up with some friends to Evanston, and, you know, you go throw a bunch of...
The firework mecca.
Correct.
Which actually, I have a great picture of my kids in front of one of the stores that says liquor and fireworks. So you can get
it's both
in the same building.
Yeah.
In
You're lucky by name there.
If you're lucky,
They do.
This is the addict mind. If you're lucky, you can swipe the credit card and get, you know, the purchase for both. So make sure the receipt says fireworks.
It says fireworks. Oh, wow.
That's the addict mind. So anyhow, I go up there, go get fireworks, and on my way back, I got pulled over, and I was taking the medication from the doctor, and I got pulled over going like double the speed limit. And with my personality that I had at the time, was very kind of a defensive one. I was talking to the police officers and telling them like I was driving fast. I'm, you know, sorry. They never clocked me of how fast I was going, so they just let me off, and I went home. And I had this like panic anxiety moment when I got home, and all the medication. And at that point, I was drinking at the house, and my wife came in, and I was trying to explain to her like what happened with this fireworks and all this stuff. And I wasn't really speaking like English. It was just kind of gibberish. And she's never seen that before from me at all. And she went into the kitchen to go check the medication. She thought maybe I just took all of it or something. And when she came back into the bedroom, that I actually had a loaded gun to my head in our closet. And I will never get that image out of my head. And the amount of pain that I can put myself in her shoes of seeing that of her husband is, it's haunting to me. And at that point, she called the police, and the police showed up, and the police chief captain, he was a really awesome guy. He really de-escalated the whole situation. He was like a friend to me. He says, Mike, like, don't do anything crazy, you know, don't do anything. And I also had another moment that I don't need to get into. It's that happened in that closet as well. And I was, I don't know if you call it 5150 or 50, something like that. So I had to go to a psych ward for a weekend. And that was interesting because I was detoxing there. But at the same time, with the addictive mindset, I was like telling the therapist, like, the medication, it was just this justification again. It was like the medication the doctor gave me was way over the top. I know it. And like, I don't need to be here. I don't need this. I never would imagine myself being in a situation like this. And I get out, and just the wheels go off even further. I just was so angry about the situation. I didn't know how to help. I didn't know what to do. And at that point, I basically did a self-intervention with my wife and my mom and my dad. And I just told him, I was like, this is my habits, and I need to get some like help. And my dad's like, well, Mike, why don't let's go to an AA meeting? I'm like, Dad, it's a little more extreme than that. I don't think one meeting's going to help me. So that's when I was able to get some help from some friends and went to Brighton Recovery Center in Ogden.
And you checked in there in 2018?
August. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And how many days did you do there?
So I did 30 days there, and then I participated in the IOP program after.
For those who don't know, an IOP is an intensive outpatient. And basically what it does is it helps you assimilate back in to everyday life, because a lot of people, when they go through recovery, you get the 30, 45 days in my case, you know, everybody's is a little bit different. You come out, and although you've got 40, 30 days of sobriety underneath your belt, they can't prepare you for what the real world is doing.
Right. I mean, it's basically you're talking of your daily emotions, you know, like, how are you feeling today? And it's a nice way to be able to take the edge off, so you don't go back into your old patterns, you know, because when you're in rehab, you're in a bubble.
They call it the pink cloud.
Yeah. And like when I was in rehab, I for sure, I went in with the right mindset. Did I do it the right way? No, I didn't.
What do you mean?
So I went in there with the approach of doing it for outside noise. Like I wanted to do it for like my family. I wanted to do it for my wife. Truly, I wanted it for myself too, but I really had a lot of that influence where I was like, I got to show everybody that I can do this.
Did you think you were smarter than them?
Yeah.
I know because I did too.
Yeah, it's more of and I'll explain this with, sorry, I hit the mic. I'll explain this, but it's basically the difference between an internally motivated person versus an externally motivated person. So in 2018, I could say I went to rehab with a pretty heavy slant on externally motivated to be there.
I'm going to get sober for my wife. I'm going to get sober for my kids. I'm going to get sober for my family. There's so many times people reach out, Dr. Matt, on Facebook, and they want help, and its loved ones want help for their addicts. And I go, the options are out there, but I can tell you right now, and I stand true to this every time I say it, if they don't want to do it for themselves, the chances of it taking are about 0%.
Pretty minimal. It's a lot.
I'm not saying it's not possible because I know it is, but is it a long-term sustainable sobriety? I don't know.
Yeah, on our show, we've had so many examples of people where they've gone years, many years, decade, without drinking or using their DOC, but without really having that insight and making an intrinsic change, an internal change that motivates them to say, no matter what, I'm doing this for me so that I can have all of those external things, right? When you do it for yourself, when you know that this is what I have to do for me, then all of a sudden that's what really unlocks your connection to your friends, family, your job, to be able to be, the best person you can be. Right.
Yeah, and being okay with that. Because I came out and my therapist told me, he's like, you got to be careful when you go out because you're going to have a new light on you. People are going to see you differently, and just be careful with that. I didn't really know what that meant, and I'll explain that. But I came out and I just was on fire. I was like, let's just do this. Like, this is, and I remember I went to Cabo like a couple months later, and it was hard being down there. I mean, you land in the airport, and it's like there's shots tequila everywhere, and I didn't realize how hard that was going to be. Did I white knuckle it? Yeah, I did. Did I drink down there? No. Did I think about it? Yes, I did. And it was really hard to fight that urge, but I accomplished it. And then I had a really good stint, and of about 15-ish months of not drinking, but I had the same addictive mindset going. The lying, the deceiving, the hurting, I started doing things and manipulating, and I got myself into, trouble again. But the justification behind it is I'm not drinking, and you reward yourself for that. I'm not drinking, but this other behavior still exists. And I wasn't aware of it. I was still doing the same behavior towards my wife. It wasn't healthy. I wasn't being true.
So do you start drinking again?
So this is October, let me try to remember now. So November of 2019 is when I had my first relapse. I had 15 months of sobriety, and I was bad behaviors, and I was doing some stuff behind my wife's back, which really put a damper on our relationship that it was terrible. And I relapsed. I couldn't hold it in anymore. And I still did. And I fought it for 3 more months, and I had another relapse in January of 2020. It was just a night. Each one of these were a day, and I told my wife what happened, but I didn't tell her exactly below it what was the problem that I was doing. And then I fought it all the way until August of 2020, and that's when everything bottlenecked. I was just tired of a lot of stuff, and my therapist in 2018, he told me, he says, Mike, this is your chance in rehab to get it all out on the table. And I thought it was just drinking. I was just like, that's all I need to fix. This is the whole reason why people go to rehab. It's not the behavioral behind it. And
so you didn't come clean with everything.
Correct.
The first time.
Mm-hmm.
And you think that's why it didn't stick?
Yeah.
What do you think, Dr. Matt?
Sure. I think that's good self-awareness at this point. At the time, there's something about, in therapy we talk about catharsis, and that's a real powerful experience. If you've really ever sat down and just let it all out, really been authentic and honest with somebody in a setting like with a therapist, there's a change that comes over a person. It's not always permanent, but that change when you're just really let it all out there and feel that despite just airing every bit of my dirty laundry, I'm still accepted. I'm still, that didn't change the fact that people don't love me anymore, that sort of thing. That's powerful and motivating, and you kind of want more of that. When you hold back, especially in a setting like therapy, then you miss out on some or all of that, but you also miss out on vital insight as to why you are drinking. Like, yes, there may be a biological addiction here. Yeah, you may have been predisposed to that genetically, but what are the reasons why I self-destruct? That might be a better way to think of it. What are my self-destruction? Where is that coming from? And right now, on the surface, the self-destruction everyone sees is the alcohol, because you can't hide it after a while. But there's a lot of other stuff, and if we don't get in there and work on that, denial is a powerful thing, and we can keep stuffing that down for years. But then eventually, like a birthday party balloon, if you blow too much air in it, it's going to pop.
And you did pop. Our friend Dr. Matt, Rob Eastman, says, I'm sure he didn't come up with it, but he's the one that introduced it to me, is we're only as sick as our secrets.
Yeah, that's a good summary of what I was trying to say.
But if you do that, then and that's why when I started this podcast and when I got sober, I just wanted to get it all out. I didn't want anyone to have any questions. If you want to know, I'll tell you. And
well, you're kind of unique in that way, Casey. I think a lot of people, most people, err on the other side, which is, well, I'll tell you enough, but I don't want to tell you everything. And I think that has served you really, really well, and it will serve other people really well. But most people, they're embarrassed, they're shy, they don't, and denial can actually be something that we're not even aware of all the time. So until you start talking about it in a therapeutic setting, you may not really fully understand what's driving your addiction.
Yeah, but a birthday balloon, you popped.
Yeah, and let me jump back again in 2018. I came out, and this is another thing I need to tell you too. When I was in rehab, I went in there and I would just say, I'm here for just alcohol. And you would hear other stories of people of these stories of heroin and meth and all these, other drugs. And your brain starts to one up yourself towards them too. Naturally I was like, oh man, I'm at least I don't have that, or at least I don't have this, but I still had all these way underlying issues that were still as destructive into my family or to my friends.
I was 45 and I called my mom from rehab. I said, Mom. She said, yeah. I said, I think I'm in the wrong place. She goes, why? I said, because I'm in here for Bud Light. There's people in here for meth, and they're shooting heroin between their toes. I think I'm in the wrong place. You know what my mom said? Shut up, Casey. You're in the right place.
That's good advice.
But I know exactly what you're saying. I was like, wait a minute. I'm not like these guys. And then when I got down to the bottom, I am. And I had to accept that. But you do put yourself on your pedestal, or you try to differentiate yourself from the other addicts, because it's so hard to accept that you're an addict.
Right. So at that point, I was relying on my overconfidence to be able to be okay, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna get through this. And the same thing, I came out of rehab and I would still hang out with the same people. I'm not saying that they're bad people. They're really good people, but they just have different views of life than I do. So I would just say, well, yeah, I'll go on a trip with them, but I'll just be the one who doesn't drink. But it's the same term again. If you hang around the barbershop long enough, you're going to get your hair cut. It's very true. And that's what happened to me, where I started to noticing not the aspect of drinking, but it was the behavior behind of what they were doing. And I was part of it. I wanted to fit in. I was doing things that I shouldn't have been doing.
Mm-hmm. See, and Dr. Matt, I'm vibing with you all the way up into the barbershop and the haircut, because in my addiction, it's different, but I still hang out with people who do. I'm secure in my recovery and know my limits. I don't put myself in situations to where I even think about that. You know what I mean? But I still hang out with the same friends. I just went to Wendover 2 weeks ago and had a great time, because I want to live and I don't want to be afraid. I'm not saying I go out there and I'm mixing cocktails for everybody. Right. You know what I mean? But I'm resolved in my sobriety.
And I think it's, to each their own. And and maybe down the road, I will have more connections with people like that. I think for the time being, I kind of needed a timeout.
And I think that's good for you. I think that's in your recovery. And when people reach out, and I say that, I said, you've got to find a recovery that's going to work for you. You've got to figure something that you can buy into, that you said, lock, stock, and barrel, that's what I want. And I know in my recovery of where I want to be, and that's my goal, and that's where I'm going. And I just keep going every day. So, yeah, but I've said that on my post. I just had one on Instagram that I said, I got sober to live and not hide. I know a lot of people are hiding, but it sounds like you're active. You're 4 months into it. So
yeah, so let me kind of jump back one more time. In the 2018 mold that I was in, AA is, the whole principle is built upon a higher power, something that's greater than, power than you. And I didn't really comprehend that. I grew up LDS, so I was like, okay, I feel like I have a connection. I know how to pray. I felt feelings of whatever inside. But to apply that with alcoholism, I had a tough time kind of analyzing and realizing how to do that. So in 2018, I could say I came out of the whole rehab program relying on myself. I was doing it as I've typically done things in my past. And I was just self-confident. I was like, I can do this. And then again, I wanted the outside to look at me and saying, wow, look at Mike. Holy cow, he did it. Like, he's an example. He's really good. And everyone's, patting my wife's back, saying he's a, great husband, great, father. And then when I'd hear those things, I would just think of the horror of the stuff I've done to her. And it's like, oh, this is not real. I've really done some really bad stuff.
Did you feel at that time that your wife was forgiving of your hurtful behaviors, or was that in doubt?
I think it's a mix. I think there was moments where she was, but she definitely still had a lot of stuff to process. A lot of
was
things.
She getting any help, going to therapy, anything like that?
In the 2018, I think she did a little bit. She is currently right now with all the stuff that's going on, but she. We just would talk about it. We were reading a couple different books together, and I was going to AA. She was part of that too. I actually had a podcast for a little while with one of the workers. It was one of the centers I was at. We'd bring social workers on and other addicts and just talk about different things, and that lasted for about 9 months. My wife was a guest on it. I felt like it helped her out to kind of tell her story. Yeah.
Well, I asked just because we know that addiction is a family disease. It affects everybody, not just the addict. And I think for the addict to truly be in recovery, everyone in the family has to be in recovery from the effects of the addiction on them. And
it's
so
a family disease.
It's hard for you to have true recovery, I think, if your wife's still really struggling with the fallout of your behavior.
Yeah, and I feel like one of my biggest remorses that I have is that she's made this comment to me a few times of first rehab and even second rehab is, there goes Mike again. He's getting the attention and he's getting the help and I'm not. And that really,
where's my support? I think that's the common.
And it hurts me to
response.
hear that. And just like I read a book, The Fifth Vital. It's a really good book that came out, and he states in it that in addiction, all become casualties. Everybody does in the family. It's just this ripple of wave that hits everybody, and it's a very selfish disease.
Amen. So you pop, you say in October, that's when it gets real ugly.
Yeah, so August, I tell my wife everything that's going on. I had...
so you came clean, everything?
Everything. And it feels like, and that's the hard part. I've told my wife that it's a two-edged sword. Like, I have a part of me that feels good that I have it out. Like, I have nothing to hide today. And that feels really liberating because I've held it in for a long time. On the other side of it, it's the effect that it's caused on...
the hurt.
Oh, yeah. Like, it's just the amount of pain and guilt that I feel from that is just... I can't describe it. It's horrible. So we were trying to do some stuff in September. We were going back and forth. We were going through some marriage therapy. I don't know if I really felt like the timing was right. I think we were just trying to do it. We're definitely in those trauma responses, the freeze, fawn, fight, flight, fornicate. It's like that's basically what I feel what was happening. We're dealing with trauma, and I can't believe putting myself in her shoes of having her entire rug ripped out from underneath her. Like, oh wow, that was alcohol, but it's all this other stuff that you were doing. And it was just a battle. We would just fight, I was trying to justify things. I was trying to be there for her. I didn't know how to do any of it. And then I was up in Jackson Hole at a client's house up there, and I relapsed up there. And I had my 5-year-old son was with me, and he was asleep in a hotel with me, and I just broke. I couldn't hold it in anymore. It was just I was alone. I didn't know who to talk to, who to reach out to. At that point, I didn't have a sponsor, and I relapsed. And in the morning, I woke up, and I haven't had a hangover for a while, so I felt that effect of it, and it just drove me nuts. I was just really agitated and just really frustrated at how did my life, like, how did I get myself here, and the why and the why and the why, and thinking of all the hurt behind me. And I drove home from Jackson Hole, and I pulled into Huntsville, and I just thought, I don't really want to go home. I just know that we have so much conflict going on right now. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to resolve this.
And that's a dangerous place to be, right, Dr. Matt? I mean, it's I can see it in your face. I can hear it in your voice. That's a scary place to be.
It was troubling. And I was in the parking lot, and my son was asleep in the back seat, and I was out of gas, and I just sat there in the car. I didn't want to open the door to wake him up, and I drank and drank and drank and drank, and I was there for a while. And I had tracking on my phone, and my wife was trying to figure out where I was. My phone was somewhere lost in my truck, and I just didn't care. And not that I didn't care, it was just I just didn't know how deep everything was. And then I got a tap on the window from a paramedic, and he said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "You've been here for a while." And then that town's small up there, so they have police officers up there, and they're sheriffs that are paramedics. And they brought me out of the truck, and they asked me a few questions, and I got arrested. So I blew a really high amount, and by sitting in my truck in a parking lot is the intent to be driving. And that's what happened to me. So, and in that same time frame, my father and my wife were driving up to Huntsville, and they were there about the same time. So my wife actually saw me handcuffed, and
had to get your 5-year-old son out the back.
Yeah, I asked, if they could be. I wasn't belligerent or anything. I was trying to be calm, and I knew that this was not good. And I was just like, let's not, hopefully we don't make this a scene for him to make it traumatic as already it is, to seeing what's going on. And they were pleasant with that. There was nothing crazy that happened in that moment, but seeing my wife's face, I can't get that image on my head. I don't know if I ever will, of just the disappointment that she had looking at me and just thinking, why and how did this happen? And I was booked in Weber County. I was there for 6+ hours, and COVID was going on, and they had this full lockdown, and I'm a very claustrophobic person, and I just sat in this concrete bench. And the idea in AA where they say rock bottom, that was it for me.
You found it.
I found it 100%. And I just remember just pleading, like, please this is the worst. Please, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I just don't want, like, thoughts of not even wanting to be alive, like, you just are not even worth it anymore. And I just sat there and just, like, pled, and, and I got out. My dad came pick me up. I fell asleep, and the wheels turned off again. I was still erratical, depressed about how everything was going on. I was able to get to the gas station and still buy more alcohol. My mom had a prescription for some anti-anxiety medication. I took all of them, and I was in a 3-day fog where I don't remember anything.
Was that with the intent to die that you took those pills?
I don't say it's an intent to die, but it was definitely like, I just don't care what happens to me at this point.
So very self-destructive.
Yeah, just like, I just don't.
Hopeless.
And I don't remember any of it. That's the, when you hear stories of, like, crazy stories and people are like, I blacked out, and I just, like, I was gone for like a week. Like Dak Shepard, he had all these moments where he told it on his podcast that he just goes missing for like 7 days. Yeah. I never knew that could happen. And I had a 3-day window where apparently I drank and took a bunch of anti-anxieties. I cracked my head open on my driveway. I was in an ER room for a night. And I heard all these stories after the fact, and it's just like, all it is just like hurt. And then I jump into, again, the one person who's closest to me is my wife, and thinking, what is she even thinking? What does she even think about me? Like, these stories are just so traumatic. And enough's enough.
So you check yourself back in?
Mm-hmm. So I went to detox. I was there they didn't keep me there because I wasn't as active as I was in 2018. It was like a massive weekend bender. So it wasn't like I was doing it for months on end. So I was there for a couple hours, and I checked back into rehab, same place. And my therapist, who was my therapist at IOP, he just laid into me, point blank, sat me down, and just said, what do you want to do? What's your motivation of being here? And I says, I don't know. And he says, let me tell you a story. And he just wrote it down. And you do a circle diagram and another circle where they overlap each other. He wrote internal, external, and he just wrote motivation on there. And he said, let me teach you what internal motivation is and what external motivation is. And he broke it out. Internally, you're doing it because you love it. You want it. You want to do it. The external side of it is you're looking for the reward, the pat on the back. This is wrong. But he says if you continue to do internal, you gain all of the external. It just becomes part of it. So that was day one. And so for 30 days, I cut off all my ties, really with family members. I just was I got to focus, and COVID was going on. So it was really nice because in 2018, you go out in the druggy buggy, the bus or whatever, and you go do fun stuff. COVID now, you can't do anything. Family members can't come up and visit you. And I just felt like it was a moment where it was a higher power moment again that you need to be alone. You need to do this for yourself. And I felt those feelings of just you got to just dive down and do this. And I was how? And it was it was these messages or signals. It was just be simple. Don't make fun of taking it a day at a time like he did in 2018. He thought that was kind of a joke that people said that. But apply it. Just apply these small little things that's simple if you can make it, internalize it.
Well, when you're no longer focused on the external reward, the approval of everyone else, when you're no longer focused on that, when that's not present, all you're left with is your own thoughts and your own perceptions. And I think that that's a brilliant point that you're making, that for anybody to make any significant change in their life, it has to be internal. Specifically, if you're trying to overcome something as severe as an addiction. And maybe this is one of the benefits of COVID. I think when bad things come along in life, a great exercise is to pause and say, but what's the benefit of this bad thing? And you're not the only person I've talked to who has benefited from being isolated and having to dig down and be really truly, maybe for the first time in your life, self-reflective about what you need to change.
Yeah, and so there was moments in rehab in 2020 where, the therapists were like, hey, Mike, do you want to be the leader of the house, or do you want to teach this class? And I would just say no. In 2018, I was sure, I want to run this place, I could do this. I love it. And I just would...
Which was the theme of your life. You're
Correct.
the AP on your mission.
Correct. You're
kind of setting the good example when you're younger. You're always out there in front with everybody looking at Mike saying what a great guy he is. And it's interesting that in this last go-round, you turned that stuff down.
I had to. I just felt it. And again, I was relying on what AA is built upon. It was the higher power. I was what feels right and following your gut. And that's what was happening. I was just no, just say no. You don't need to right now. You need to go focus and go, I was writing in my journals. I was reading books. And I was looking for every angle I could, every approach. Because, again, in 2018, I fought it. I was I'm just going to go to 30 days. I'm just going to go home. I don't need to do anything. I'm healed. And I was just what else? I was going into the therapist's offices at lunchtime. He'd be give me more. Dude, can I sit in here and eat lunch with you guys? And it was making some of the other clients mad because they were why is Mike getting all this extra time? But I was really just trying to absorb it. And same thing, I got out and I went to the PhD program and continued to work, and I got a sponsor. I'm on step 4 right now. I've been working through that, and step 4, 5, 6 are pretty similar. They all kind of add on to each other. And that's where I'm at right now. And going to AA, I tried doing 90 of 90. It was a little complex. I'm
For those who don't know, 90 days is 90 meetings in 90 days.
It's hard.
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of them on Zoom, but I was busy with other things, and I'm not making any justifications for it. I'm being honest. I tried as hard as I could do to 90 and 90, and I got pretty far with it, more like 71, 72 days of the 90.
There's just not a ring to 70 and 70.
I know, it doesn't, yeah.
But
so
you're now 4 months sober.
I am.
And
107 days today.
The listeners would want to know, how's it with the wife and kids?
So I guess to jump back into rehab, third weekend, I received papers from the court that my wife was filing divorce.
I found out my ex-wife was getting married in rehab.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got those papers, and it was really shocking. I kind of had a feeling that stuff was going on because we were having these family therapy sessions, and she was just like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And I definitely was fighting it. I was just like, give me like a chance. Like I was begging, and saying, I literally have everything on the table. Like, what can we try to do to make this right? And again, the amount of hurt on all angles of her, I don't blame her of anything that she's doing. And I'm supporting her 100% of whatever her decisions are to be. And I told her I would stand by her side of whatever that is. And so that hurt. That really hurt. I remember just like falling asleep that night. It was on October 30th and thinking that Halloween's the next day. And that next day at Halloween, I remember at the rehab center, there was some little kids that came trick-or-treating, and they didn't know if it was a rehab center or not. And they came and knocked on the door. And I just stared at them in the window, and I started crying. I was just like, my gosh, like all this wasted time that I have done, and I should be at home with my kids trick-or-treating. And it was just these signals I was gaining. It was like, just you need to feel the pain right now. You need to feel it because it's going to hopefully teach you that you'll never get yourself back in this position again. And that's how I defined it, as those feelings. And I just got out of rehab when I got out, and was starting to open some communication back up with my wife. And she doesn't trust me. She doesn't, she says that she doesn't believe anything that I say, and that's all fair. I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody at this point, but to myself, and get myself in that healthy spot. And I have hope, just like we talked about at the very beginning of this, is that's all I have. Words can last as long as a sentence, and it's the actions that you're really implementing that I am learning to stand by, because I've made mistakes from the last 4 months. There's been moments where I've said way too much to my wife, and just like, come on, like, look at the future. Are you sure you really want to do this? Or kids, it's going to be so damaging, like divorce and, co-parenting and, and all the angles of it. And she knows that. Like, I'm not an idiot. She knows all those things, and she still needs to make her.
To be honest, she's probably been co-parenting
for a while. Yeah.
She has. If your alcohol was that bad, she's
felt like for a while that she's been doing it on her own, and it was making her unhealthy. The amount of enabling she was doing on my side of watching me, wondering where I was, wondering what I was doing. She needed a timeout from that. So at this point, we're still proceeding with that route. And like I said, I'm just have to focus on me. It's the only thing right now that really matters. It's that internal perspective, because all of those external things become part of it, that I will be a good husband, or I will be a good father, though it comes from the internal side of things. So, and it's been small moments where she's gained slow trust back with me and allowed me to do things with the kids. And not that she has like a custody thing. I'm just saying she wants to, trust the angle that I'm doing, and I'm safe with them. And I'm just standing by it. It's humble to do that. It's hard. It's really hard. And saying, because I know who I am, and that's probably been one of the hardest parts of this, is like all of my really close, like family members, my aunts, my uncles, when they hear this story, every one of them is like, this is not you. Like, this is not you. And my wife knows that too. She knows who I am. And it's really hard to see somebody go in such a catastrophic way of just spinning themselves in a really dangerous zone. So,
well, it sounds to me like at this point you're approaching your sobriety the right way for the first time, really, to fully embrace this idea that you have to make sobriety your number one priority every day, because without that, you can't engage anyone else in a meaningful way. Your wife's working through her trauma of your addiction over the years, and I hope that she'll come to a resolution that feels right to her, and that the two of you can have have peace amongst each other for you and your kids. But I think that this is a perfect example. I hope listeners are listening that, you have to prioritize your internal motivation. You have to wake up every single day and realize that if this isn't number one, then everything else eventually is going to go away. But if it's number one, like the circles, I think your therapist's drawing was brilliant, because the circles tend to take each other over. If you make it internal, then all the other positives eventually kind of come back into your life. And so congratulations on the work you're doing now, and I hope you can continue to make that your focus.
Thank you. My therapist, he's from the South, and he had a word for it. So have you ever heard the term lanny up?
No.
Okay. So a lanny up is when you're at a restaurant and you order your main dish. So a lanny up is like sides or extras.
Okay.
So he's told me, he said, Mike, like, internal motivation is the meal. Lanny ups are all the external motivations. He's like, you'll gain all your lanny ups if you do this internally. And it was like it really kind of helped me kind of
I like it.
Simplify it a little bit more,
Yeah.
But yeah.
I do appreciate a good food analogy.
Right? Who doesn't? Hey, we appreciate you stopping by. And, 4 months of sobriety, I know that's tough. I've been there. I've been down that road. But I, when you told your story, it was like we went along the ride with you. And at first, but you can look in your face, your mannerisms changed, and you can tell that you're serious this time.
Yeah, I definitely say I'm 100% committed, and I'm very open-minded on all angles of it. So to kind of be vulnerable, kind of like what you did, I got out and I wrote a Instagram post, and I just was like sick of it. I'm like, if you really loved me or cared who I am, then you'll understand that I've made some mistakes. And like, I just laid it out. And like I said, this is not doing it to look at me, but I need everyone to know like where I'm coming from, because I'm so tired of like, otherwise I'll do it again, of caring so much on what other people view and see me. And I don't. Like, when people hear some of these horrible stories, and some are true, some are not, I don't even care if they're true or not. Like, I care about the true ones, but the ones that are not, I'm just like, whatever. I just don't let it affect me, and I just absorb it. And if there's amends I need to make, then, that will come down to making those amends to those people that need it, and being okay with that and saying, yeah, I am human. And the main point that I'm really trying to value from this is the positivity of, I know my children are going to have struggles one day. I feel it, that they're going to have issues just like everybody does. And I want to be able to use my knowledge that I've gained in a positive way to be able to help them. If they say, hey, Dad, I have a question about this, my friends are doing this, and being able to sit them down and be like, I have some real experience with this. Let's talk about it. And that's how I see a lot of the positivity of using the experience in a way that can create to help one person. If it's only one person, that's I've done my job.
Well, it certainly is. The way we become seasoned and the way we become wise is not avoiding pain and problems, but working through them. And so I hope that continues to be your focus, because not only your kids but others will benefit from that. But that's, you think about some wise older person that gave you some mentorship growing up. We only see them at that stage, but the way they got there was working through their pain and their problems in life. And so if we find ourselves in that position with pain and with problems, being hopeful that working through them can season us to become that adult, that older person that we hope we could be, that's how you get there.
And one thing I really want to say is a balance, because like I said, in 2018 to 2020, it's different. It's the pendulum. When you go from really a bad to a really good, you swing it really fast. But trying to create that middle balance has been key, and it's getting a schedule, is waking up and doing the things you're supposed to be doing. I wake up at 4:30 every morning to do an hour of meditation, and I just plan the day accordingly so you have a consistent pattern. That's the only way that this works. If you have all this free time, you're doomed.
Yeah, consistency is the key, for sure.
And we want to say thank you for stopping by today. You're listening to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. More importantly, it's about recovery. And don't forget, Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.
2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
There's desperation and anguish.
More than 80,000 Afghans have since arrived in America, but this story is still unfolding. I'm Andrea Smartin. In my new podcast, Stranger Becomes Neighbor, we'll find out what happens to these new arrivals in our communities. Who would help our newest neighbors? Follow us at kslpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen.